G'day guys, Mr. Circle here, and today we're looking at some Primaris Marines and an Orc. So, a new Ragnar Blackmane miniature. Now the old miniature is about 30 years old. A little bit less than, about, let's say 27 years old. I think it was 92 or 93 it came out, so yeah. Fans have been calling for an update for this model since 5th edition. That was about the time where people went, okay, too long, it needs to be redone. And looking at how many miniatures were redone in 5th edition, and the end of 5th edition, characters like Belial, for example, finally got a model. Manius Calgar got his redo in 4th edition. He'd also been redone in 3rd edition. Prior to that, there was a Cato Sicarius redo. There was a lot of other Marines in other factions. To this point, Dante still hasn't been redone. But, yeah, Ragnar gets redone. I think the model looks good. I have one problem with it. There's one flaw, and I would like to talk about it because it's a nitpick, but it is important. And that's how he is placed on this pebble. And I'm calling it that, and someone said I've got sand in my vagina for pointing it out about the size of this pebble. Maybe I do. But essentially, how is he in this position? This is what happens when you create things in AutoCAD without understanding the physical relationship of a human or a humanoid object and their surrounds. So what you have here would make perfect sense if this was perhaps a jump pack Marine. But this is a Marine in power armor, and he's pushing off an actually surprisingly vertical surface on the far side of the object. Now, the biomechanics of this is all wrong. You see, if you had to organically sculpt this, it would be a bit different. Because this is being done in a computer, you just pose him on top of it and it works. If this was real life, think about whenever you've tried to jump up on top of an object and leap off it. Probably back to when you're a kid in the playground, jump on a seesaw or something like that. He's jumping onto the downward slope on the opposite side of the object, and then pushing off that to launch himself into the air. Whilst not impossible, it's biomechanically very unlikely, we'll say. So what do I mean by this? Well, I've done this creative little drawing to show you. If you follow the arrows, he's jumping up and across and coming down on the far side of the object. When in real life, this basically would just lead to you sliding clean off the object and landing on your ass and hurting your back. You would actually land on the edge of the object, not on the side facing of it, and then push off the edge. That's what we would do. So say you were trying to jump over something like a round fire hydrant, for example. Would you try and jump onto the top center of it and push off, or would you try and jump to the far side as it curves away and then jump off it? You wouldn't, would you? That's just silly. It's a good way to hurt yourself. So this is just a little thing I wanted to point out. It's a nitpick. Don't get me wrong, but it's a realism issue. Even in this universe of space wizards and demons and things like that, he probably should be on flat ground or jumping off an object which is flat to this side of him. Because if you look at this, it should be more like a box jump. He's jumped up on top of an object and now he's leaping off this object at someone. Instead, in order to get into a position where he's on the outward sloping surface of it, he would need to be doing something like this wall spin here, where he jumps up onto the vertical surface and then pushes off back the other direction. It's neither here nor there. It doesn't detract really from the model, but it's something you notice, and it's at a subconscious level. It doesn't look quite right to you. Like, why is he up in the air on this rock? Why is he pushing off the rock in that direction? It should be either flat or on the ground. Because that's how your brain works. And this is not how people jump in real life, and you know it. And it's just a little quirk I wanted to bring up because, hey, we're talking models. Anyway, the iconography looks good, the model itself looks fine. No negatives to talk about there. I think it looks great. New Ghaz, he's huge. I think the one thing I dislike about him is the head seems a bit small. That's really about it. The actual orc head, just the armor around the body is just so huge. The guns are so huge. He looks kind of like in the third Matrix film, Matrix Revolutions. They got those like walkers that they use to defend Zion. He looks kind of like the pilots in those, like this little guy strapped into this big mech suit. When really, it's not the mech suit that should be giving Ghaz his size. It's the fact that Ghaz is just this gigantic orc that should give him this mass, this size. And so you end up with this head that's just this tiny, tiny little head in the middle of this basically dreadnought-sized armoured shell. And it doesn't look quite right to my eye, but that's literally the only thing I have against this. I think it looks great. I like the fact he's got that 4 crazy shooters on one hand. That's hilarious. I'm not sure what the big bone, teeth-looking claws are that are attached to his power core, but I like the core itself. Probably didn't need the debris on the base. It's also good that the smoke is its own separate thing that you can add or not add to the miniature. As you can see from these barrels here, clearly it's an optional extra. Great, I've been asking for this for a very long time, and a lot of people nitpicked at it, saying, oh, it's not a fair complaint. Well, obviously someone else thought it was a fair complaint, someone who works at the company, because they've finally done it. They've gone, you know what? Yeah, the smoke should be detachable. We shouldn't be forcing people to have to put that stuff on there if they don't like it, especially when you can work around it. Now, there is one problem I have with this set, and it's been mentioned by a few people now, but I'll reiterate it myself. And that is that this shouldn't be Space Wolves. Ragnar and Ghaz is not a big rivalry built up over a long time. Helbrecht, the Grand Marshal of the Black Templars, and Commissar Yarrick, famously, are the two guys, Yarrick personally, in fact, if anything, the guys that Ghaz has the real beef with. And Yarrick and Ghaz have had that beef since the Second War for Armageddon. That's where you should have gone with this. A new Yarrick model would have been great to go alongside Ghaz and really sell the tiny little human versus the gigantic monster aspect. Instead, we get a new Ragnar, and whilst I think a new Ragnar was a long time coming, probably about 12 years late, if anything, it's a bit of a funny matchup. That's all. It's like, I don't know, having War in the Heavens or something, and instead of it being something like the Necrons versus the Eldar, it's the Necrons versus the Tau or something. It's like that rivalry, it's there, but it's not being built up the same way. I don't know. It's just silly. But those are the little nitpicks. Otherwise, I really like the models. I think they look great. Now, this does lead me to a point, though, and that is the Primaris range. Ragnar is the latest in a long, long line of characters that have been turned to Primaris. It doesn't bode well for normal Space Marines, and people have been talking about Space Marines being squatted for a long time. Me personally, I've been going off the assumption that it wouldn't be until 9th edition, which I guess isn't that far around the corner, that they would start to downsize the Marine range significantly. But what we have here is basically no releases for regular Space Marines since before 7th edition. The last actual updates they got was in the 6th edition Space Marine Codex for new models. Everything since then, since before 8th edition, is Primaris. The only new model they got before 8th edition was a flyer and Gilliman himself. Everything since that time, it's Primaris. And frankly, one, I don't like Primaris, but two, the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that it didn't have to happen the way it's happened. Primaris didn't need to be new, superior, better Marines. It could have just been a true scaling. It could have just been came up with a new type of power armor. And it's just an excuse to true scale Marines by having them that new power armor. And some may say, oh yeah, but the scale, blah blah blah. Well, the scale, they increased the scale on the new Chaos Space Marines. And it worked. People aren't going, oh well, I can't field my Raptors in the same army as my new Chaos Space Marines because the scales are just so completely wrong. No, nobody cares. They look like they belong together. Well, it should have been the same way with the Primaris. You just bring out this new type of armor, the Marines are bigger than they were before. And it's like, okay, cool. Instead, by saying, all these old Marines that you built your detachments around over the past, you built your armies, built your background for, yeah, they no longer count. They're in the fucking bin, essentially, because they're not getting new releases. and all the characters they once had are being taken away from them. And that's the thing. It would be a different case if it was like, you can use your characters whenever you want, in whatever circumstances you want. But instead what we're seeing is these characters are forcibly being converted into Primaris by the company, not as an organic extension of the story. And so you're no longer able to use these same characters in the armies they were in. You're forced to play to this new ideology of their Primaris now. And that's not a great thing. Now, obviously, you can do whatever you want in your own homebrew games. Fine. But the fact is, people are asking for, 15 years, roughly, for new characters like Ragnar, and when it finally comes along, it's in the Primaris scale, and you can go fuck yourself, essentially. I think that's a bit of a disservice to the players. Because start thinking about if this was another faction. Would people treat it the same way? Like, imagine this was Eldar, and they brought out a new type of aspect warrior. Now, it's not quite Dark Reapers, and you can still use your Dark Reapers, but now you don't get Morgan Ra anymore. No, he's now the character who runs with this new aspect squad. We'll call them the Dire Reapers. Why not? People would be like, hang on a minute, I have all these Dark Reapers, and I'm a huge fan of the models, and I've been collecting them for years, and suddenly I can't use them. They'd be a bit annoyed. And then they get told, oh, well, no, you can still use them. It's just if you're going to play like competitive, well, there's this new better unit, and they stole your character. People wouldn't like it. Same thing if it was something like the Tau. Maybe you're a big fan of Commander Farsight. Well, what if Commander Farsight now, he no longer had a Crisis Battle suit, and he didn't have the Farsight Enclaves. Instead, he was his own thing, and he was with his own new type of unit that replaces Crisis suits. And you might be like, oh, I really like Crisis suits. And they're like, no. He's he's for this new close combat Tau army now. He plays differently. He suits this new faction. You can't use the old Farsight anymore. You see, it becomes a bit problematic when you think about it this way. Because there's no need for it. It shouldn't have happened this way. What should have happened was just an upscaling of Space Marines. And you could add new units like Incursors or Infiltrators or Vanguards, 50 guys who are Primaris Lieutenants in whatever pattern of armour they come up with this week. That's fine. They could have done that and incorporated into the regular Space Marine list. This is a new armour and a new force organisation chart instead of this is a new type of physical being replacing the old type of physical being that is flat out superior to the previous one. That's the cut-off point. If you're playing Dark Eldar or Eldar and they said that like your basic Dark Eldar warrior or your basic Eldar warrior were no longer being used, they were replaced by something new and unique, and you had this big collection of them and all of a sudden they just don't look as good beside this new thing, you'd be a bit pissed off. And this goes for any faction. If they do this to any faction, it's not great. And I think it's starting to reach the point now where it's getting a bit too much. It's like, okay, you clearly don't want to support the old Marines, and the only reason you've done this, well actually, I can think of a couple of reasons. They're cynical, all of them. First is, hey, everyone out there had a Space Marine army, how do we get them to buy new miniatures? That's the sleazy corporate side of things. Then you've got the more subtle, insidious side of things, which is, hey, bigger models are easier for people who can't paint to paint. And I know that sounds cruel, but it's true. So by increasing the scale on the Marines slightly, it makes them a little easier to paint so people's models don't look quite as trashy when they start the game, therefore it gives them a slight confidence boost when getting into the game. Not saying if it's a good or bad thing, but that's clearly the psychological thing that goes on here. Okay? Think about it. These new Marines, a lot less details, like actual details going on than the old Marines. See, the old Marines, you had a whole bunch of different armor marks in a box, for example. Let me see if I can find the old tactical squad. Sort of ram this point home. Okay, so the old tactical squad down here. Let's have a look, right? And I'll open up one of these new Primaris squads. This 3 will do. So, here's an old school tactical squad. What have you got? You've got some guys who have kneecaps because they're in Mark 7 armour. Then you've got some guys who are in Mark 6 armour. They've got flat shins. They've got beaky helmets. Some guys have cables on their chests, some don't. Everyone has something on their bulk gun, where it's a little Aquila, sometimes a little skull, sometimes a little laurel wreath. But then you look at these new boys, what do they got? Well, they all just have an Aquila on the gun. Just an Aquila. On their chest, they just got an Aquila. What about their helmets? Their helmets are all the same helmet. It's like that little Stahlhelm type thing. There's no skull on the surface of it. There's no grills, no different little tubes that run into them. They're all just a flat helmet. They've all got one tube either side, that kind of thing. There's no variety to the actual armour in these units. If they've got any extra details, like these little purity seals or a holster or something like that, it's kept pretty clean. They're very clean cut. Even the jetpack, the little backpack they've got, it's just different. It's just subtly different. See? You got the round little ball in the centre. No more vent grill you have to paint there. Whereas the old Space Marines, they had the vent grills on the back of their armour. They have the little cables going into the backpack. We'll see this new backpack. At the back there, there's a little cable, sure, but it's hidden away. You can just sort of see it over the back of his helmet there. One little cable. And they've just taken a lot of those details away, smoothed the miniatures out, so they're nice and easy to paint for new people to the game. Now again, I don't hate the Primaris sculpts at all, but again, like all those like studded shoulder pads, things like that, they're gone. This is just flat colours. This is the sort of army where a person can come up with no experience and just flat blue spray paint a bit of gold around each shoulder, a bit of gold on the chest, black gun with a bit of silver on it, bam, done. Nice, simple, easy. So psychologically, it's manipulative. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just that's what it's doing. It's the new player coming in is looking, there's all these guys in the exact same armor with very little extra detail going on. And again, basic changes like a studded shoulder pad can make a huge difference on existing tactical marines, but on the Primaris, they don't have any of that. The models are functionally all the same. And so, it's easier to paint. People get into the hobby because it's a lot less work than it looked like previously. Now characters, that's a little bit different, but again, a lot of the shit is optional extras like cyber familiars, little smoke on the ground like these two chaps. And camouflage, a lot of people just can't paint that, so that's not really a big deal if they don't do a good job of it. So that's just some things I've noticed. And it's not to shit on the Primaris range, I just think it could have been incorporated into the fluff better, instead of Cole being some Mary Sue who comes along and improves on the work of the Emperor, makes better Marines than Fabius could with multiple coins of himself, all the knowledge that his Primarch gave him on Primarchs and Gene Seed and all that, and the help of the Chaos Gods, and all his unsanctioned research with whatever Gene Seed stock he could muster over 10,000 years. Somehow he couldn't even compare with Primaris Belisarius Call. No, he's just too special. They've taken away all the characters of the Space Marines now. They're all Primaris, Primaris, Primaris. And all your old Space Marines, they suck now. And yeah, okay, you can still use them. You can still play them. Ask people what happens when you have an army list and they decide they no longer want to support it. Let's look at, I don't know, Warhammer Fantasy Dwarf Slayer army from Storm of Chaos. What about the Chaos Hordes that actually came in the 3.5 Eye of Terror campaign with all the mutants, the Lost and the Damned list? Whatever happened to that? You see, when Games Workshop decides, we don't want to support an army anymore, it doesn't matter how much you love the army, eventually another edition will come along and you won't have rules for it. And they'll say it's okay, just use a White Dwarf supplement or use the old rules. And you try and port it over as best you can, but it doesn't quite work as well as it should in the new edition. And then another edition will come along after that, and all of a sudden it doesn't work at all. Happened to squads. It'll happen again. Anyway, I'm back with the Outer Circle. I want to know what people think below. Do you think the way the Primaris are going is a good thing? I personally obviously think it's fucking terrible. Again, nothing wrong with redoing these characters. Not saying they're doing a bad job either. I think they've done a great job reimagining characters like Ghaz and Ragnar. But why now and why Primaris? Why can't you toss a bone to the players who don't want to play with Primaris, that don't want to play with a fucking 30-year-old Ragnar model? What, they've got to use this? What if they don't want to? You know, it's just inconsiderate, especially for people who've been playing this for a long time and have, you know, supported the company for all this time to get treated this way. I don't agree with it. And again, all they had to do was just a bit of a scale and size swap, like they did with Chaos here. Nobody's complaining about the new scale on Rubik Marines, Death Guard Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Terminators. It's just accepted that, yeah, they blend in stylistically with what's come before, and it works. Why couldn't they do that with Space Marines? They could still have new weapons, like the Hellblaster guns or whatever they're called. You know, they could still have Reavers. This could all be an organic response to the fact that Gilliman is back alive, that he is working with Belisarius Cawl. Cawl could have spent that time working on new equipment for the Marines. New and better armour, new tactics in that time. They didn't have to make actual, physical new Marines. Primaris Marines. See you all next time.